Then came the now infamous Washington Post poll of 2016, in which they surveyed 504 Native Americans out of the approximate 5 million in our country right now. And 9 out of 10 said we are not offended by that name.
Right.
And I'm sure Dan Snyder was beating his chest over that one.
Right.
But my point on television was, if 1 out of 10 is offended, then you should change that name.
And then, Skip, there was a poll that was just taken in February by, at Cal Berkeley.
Yes.
And it was like 70% says it needs to go.
And NFL.com did a poll right after the Washington Post poll and broke it down into demographics. And the younger demographic was 70% anti the name.
Right.
Okay, so did it skew older, the group that they surveyed, the Washington Post? I don't know, but a lot of Native Americans rose up and said no to that. Organization of journalists said that's misleading and misrepresenting.
Skip, they said the term Redskin came from, they offered rewards, 50 pounds for a scalp of a male, 25 pounds for a female, and 20 pounds for a child 12 or younger.
Yeah. No, so we declared war.
So what is that?
It was a war. And they killed a lot of us, and we killed a whole lot of them. And we tortured and just imprisoned a whole lot of them because we took them and put them on reservations.
Yeah, and forced them to walk the Trail of Tears.
Yeah, that was 10,000 deaths on the walk from Florida, Alabama, Georgia, all the way to what was called Indian Territory.
I mean, think about that. How many people, Skip, gonna be able to walk from where they started? Because it's Oklahoma and Montana and
part of it was in the winter, and they're just gonna die, and they did. Okay, so my point is, in 2014, under fire to lose your trademark, it dragged through court, and it dragged on through court, and it dragged, and thanks, I guess, to friends in high places, it just died a natural or unnatural death in court. I don't know what happened to it. I never heard the end of it. Okay, so what did we talk about? The original, the founder and owner of the Redskins, one of the great bigots in the history of the National Football League, an obvious out-and-out racist named George Preston Marshall. He was finally forced to integrate not until 1962 because Robert F. Kennedy threatened to take away his 30-year lease, very advantageous to the Washington football team in old what was called D.C. Stadium, which ironically became named RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Stadium. But under that threat of financially crippling you by taking your lease away, he finally said, okay, I give up, I integrate, and they took Ernie Davis high in the draft. I think was he number one?
He was number one.
Yeah, and Ernie Davis said, I ain't playing for that team, right? And so they were forced to try again. So the point was, that's what it took. It took like governmental intervention and threat to make this happen. So again, we read the other day that Nike has pulled its quote unquote Redskin gear off its website. Okay, that's a huge start right there. And we're told that both PepsiCo and then of course FedEx anti this nickname. So even if you lose 40% of your minority investors, Dan Snyder's a very wealthy man. He could make that part up. Like he can get other investors to come in, or he could probably foot that bill himself.
Now, when he's only worth 2.6, then to say the value, it fluctuates between 3.1 and 3.4 billion dollars. So you're looking at 1.24 to 1.5, maybe 1.6.
Whatever. I'm just saying he could probably raise that money. And, again, FedEx was the naming rights on the stadium.
Normally, when these teams come available, and they don't come available often, you have multiple bidders wanting to get this. It's not no thing that's going. It's not like a house, Skip, that might be on the market for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. They come on the market, and within a day or two, you got 10, 15 people want to buy one of these franchises.
Okay, so I will bet you that right now, Dan Snyder's game plan is that he's hoping to wait this out. He's hoping that Black Lives Matter dies down just a little bit, so he goes back under the radar with his nickname. And he loves his nickname because he grew up a Redskin fan, and he, out of sentimentality, he's talking about, you can't do this to the longtime fans because this is what we grew up with. And by the way, Ron Rivera also spent part of his childhood as a military so-called brat, traveled with his parents to military bases. For a while, he was in the Washington area, went to a Joe Theismann camp and had an affinity for the team called the Redskins.